Well, hey everybody. So I'm back today to share with you some of my all-time favorite nonfiction reads. I find that when I'm out of school or I'm on spring break right now, and I find that when I'm not actively doing school, I really like to be continuing learning something. Maybe that's just me. I know a lot of people really like kind of the mind-numbing video games and TV, and I'm guilty of that too, but I do really like continuing to learn about things that I'm specifically interested in while I'm not doing coursework. So I have a couple of books to share with you. These are all of my favorite nonfiction books that I own. Now, some of them might blur the line with nonfiction because a couple little books are not necessarily, they're based in fact, but they're not like cited and researched necessarily, but I still consider them nonfiction. So, getting onto the list, the first two books that I have are these beautiful little editions of, this is a speech by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie that you can find as a TED Talk, We Should All Be Feminists. And then this one is actually a letter that Adichie wrote to her friend when her friend had a baby and was asking, how do I raise my daughter feminist? So they're both really, really tiny and adorable, and I love these copies. And this is where I kind of say they're nonfiction, but it kind of borders on a memoir because Adichie talks about her life experience when it comes to feminism and gives her own personal suggestions. However, they do draw a lot on modern issues with feminism and how we can kind of help instill these morals in children. And that's something I found particularly interesting about these because they were both centered around children, and because children are the beginning of society and we are teaching them, as they're growing up, as soon as a baby is born, they begin learning something, and they begin learning all about gender dynamics and gender norms and the way that male and female are separate. So Adichie talks a lot about that in these two books, and I would highly, highly recommend these if you're interested in starting off on feminist literature. In general, I think it's a really, really good start for feminist literature. My curtains are flying around. Oh. All right, so moving on to a different genre. Here we have some books about death, and yes, I know it sounds depressing, but these are such fun and amazing books. This is From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty, and this is Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs, also by Caitlin Doughty. Doughty is one of my favorite authors right now. She has a YouTube channel called Ask a Mortician, and she's written 3 books, one of which is a memoir, which I don't own. And these two, they are nonfiction, but again, there's kind of a memoir aspect to them because in this one, Doughty is traveling around the world and she talks about her experiences, but it's all from a, very well-researched perspective. So kind of getting into what these are about. This one, as I said, is Doughty is a mortician and she's traveling the world trying to learn about some death practices and how different cultures take care of their dead. And that's all documented in here. A bunch of different countries are documented, and also the illustrations are absolutely amazing. I love the way this is illustrated, and I absolutely love the cover of this book. It's one of my all-time favorite book covers ever. Definitely would recommend that if you're interested in kind of cultural differences as well as death practice differences. It definitely brings a lot of the cultural aspect into it. It's not just about, dead bodies. It's about culture and how culture informs your decision and how religion informs your decision on death. So definitely recommend that. And then this one is a collection of questions that kids have asked her during her time as a mortician. And it's also illustrated really, really beautifully. I love this copy. And basically she answers them in very, very well-researched terms, but makes it kind of fun and almost silly to read. So it definitely feels childish in the sense that children ask these questions and she's responding to them in a way that children would understand and appreciate. But also, it's very, very intellectually, well researched, and she really does a good job of explaining it, even if you're an adult. It's great. I love the combination of comedy and serious talk about death. It makes for a light, fun read. I think I read this in one night, and I loved it. So, the next topic that I'm super interested in is cooking and food. You probably noticed from my reading vlog. If you haven't watched that, go watch that after this video. But I love cooking, and I have been interested in cooking since I was a little kid. I always loved it. And lately, I've really loved reading nonfiction books about cooking. So I have 2 books here by Michael Pollan, who writes a lot of books on food, plants, cooking, all of that. This one is not necessarily about cooking, but it is about food. 3 of the 4 plants that are talked about are food plants. So this is basically about how, it's hard to explain. The title of it is The Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan, and that kind of explains the fact that, like, plants evolved for our human desires, right? So they are intelligent in a way. They understand how to get us to keep growing them. And in turn, we are helping them carry on their life. So they're helping us by giving us sustenance or enjoyment or sweetness, like apples, pleasure from sweetness. And we in turn are, growing them and continuing their species. So this was definitely a really interesting read. I was actually shown this book in a class that I took last semester, an American literature class, and we read the part on, or we looked at the part on apples because we were doing a unit on Johnny Appleseed, and I was so interested in this concept of the botany of desire that I went up and picked this book up as well. And then moving on to the other Michael Pollan book that I've read. This one's significantly bigger, but this one is called Cooked, and it is about the 4 main ways, I think it's 4 ways, the few main ways that we cook food and what it means for us as a culture. And I love the idea that we can take food and culture and show how linked they are. I think that's really important as a baker of sourdough bread. The fact that bread like that has been made since ancient Egyptian times. There is, sourdough starters that are hundreds and hundreds of years old that people have kept going. And it really is food and cooking is a bedrock of culture. So that delves into this a lot, as well as talks about, the gender dynamics between food and the kitchen, how, sometimes, most of the time, grilling or things like that are considered a male-dominated area, and then when you get to, cooking in water, baking, and all of that, you start to get into a female territory because that's the kitchen domain, as opposed to a grill, which is normally an outdoorsy, manly, quote-unquote domain. So he's kind of showing those stereotypes and trying to break them down through this book. And the last nonfiction that I would recommend is actually an anthology called Literary Witches by Tasia Kitasakai, I'm not sure how to say that, and Katie Horan. I tried, but I absolutely love this book. It is a collection of a bunch of literary, well, they're saying witches. It's really any female author who displays a kind of magical way of writing about whatever she's writing about. So there's a whole bunch of different authors in here, and there is, again, beautiful, beautiful illustrations throughout, and the authors, they have this illustration which kind of represents the author and what they were like, and then they also have facts about the author and recommended reading, and this kind of like poetic interpretation of trying to explain the author. And it's so creative and, again, poetic and beautiful that I find it so interesting that they didn't just, a lot of anthologies just give you a picture and explain to you what an author is like. And this kind of takes the style and deeper meaning of an author's work into account when you are reading it. So if you're interested in either feminism or literature and women, female authored literature, this is a great anthology to start with. When I picked this up, I went through and read so many of the recommended readings for this. Anybody who writes poems, I was immediately looking at poetry and trying to get my hands on, books by them. So, great book, would definitely recommend it. And those are my recommendations for nonfiction books. So I love all of these. They're all some of my very favorite books in general, but also my favorite nonfiction books. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that some of these books might help you continue learning, even if you're on break, or in general, it's just fun to learn about things that you're interested in. So I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!